Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, bienvenue, bienvenido to everyone who has joined us today. I am Sarah Shear. I'm the president of Eco-Agriculture Partners and also the chair of the 1,000 Landscapes for 1 Billion People initiative. It's my great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the co-conveners of this dialogue series, the 1,000 Landscapes Partners, the IKEA Foundation, and the Loudest Foundation. And also on behalf of the dialogue organizers for today, Climate Kick, Common Land, Regenerative Development Group, the Rainforest Alliance, and Eco-Agriculture. Let me begin by introducing 1,000 Landscapes, which not all of you may know. This is a group that came together in 2019 to form a radical collaboration of change agents who are working together to accelerate landscape efforts to sustain and restore ecosystems, to achieve food security, to build rural prosperity, and confront climate change. We're now a group of nearly 40 organizations from all around the world and growing. Our focus is on landscape partnerships, the stakeholder groups that are stewarding their landscapes toward the future. 1,000 Landscapes works to strengthen those partnerships' capacities, to help them build coalitions, to influence policy, to tap the information technology revolution to meet their needs, and to mobilize finance. We're currently co-designing and testing innovations directly in about 22 landscapes around the world, and we are building networks that will serve 1,000 landscape partnerships to scale their impacts by 2030. One of the greatest challenges for landscape partnerships is to mobilize financing for the key projects that are needed for landscape scale transformation. At the same time, there's a growing flow of international and national finance, public, private, philanthropic, for climate, for regenerative agriculture, for watershed management and water flows, for biodiversity conservation, that has a very difficult time reaching the people who need that finance on the ground to make change. The concept of integrated landscape finance provides a potentially powerful solution for both the landscape actors and the financiers. And a centerpiece of 1,000 Landscapes is to catalyze these solutions. Before moving to the program, let me provide just a few technical notes for the group. First of all, please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to introduce yourself. Tell us your name, your organization, and maybe any particular interest that you have in finance. Please also check under the participant tab to make sure that your name shows your name and organization. During the first half of this session, when you'll be hearing a number of presentations, you actually won't be able to see the videos of the other participants, and you won't be able to see their names, and you won't be able to talk. But as soon as we're done with the presentations, we're going to open up the system so everyone can then speak. You can see videos and you can chat with one another privately as well as to the groups. So I encourage you to make sure that you're properly named in that participant tab. Also feel free to use the chat for comments as we move through, or if you have relevant resource materials that you would like to share, particularly in the first half of the session. Secondly, I want to let you know that as we're going through the program, I won't be providing complete introductions to the various speakers, but Shannon will be putting into the chat the more detailed bios for each of them so you can learn about how awesome they all are. Then I wanted to mention that for the initial introductory, the framing presentations that Daniel Zimmer and Seth Seamus will be doing, and then that Percy and Carl will be doing from the landscapes. Please use the function of the Zoom, which is at the bottom of your screen, called Q&A, to put in there any questions that you may have that are specific to the presenters, and say which ones you'd like to have them respond, and they will then respond to you in writing. But this dialogue is intended for dialogue. So what we're going to try to do in the last half of it, when we move to the discussions, is to invite you to provide more detailed responses and suggestions in a shared Google Doc. And the moderators will explain that in more detail when we get to that point. Finally, just to remind you again that all the participants will be muted during the presentations, and then we'll open it up. So once you do want to, we get to the discussion section, to make a comment, you can raise your hand using the Zoom function, wait to be called on, and then unmute yourself. But otherwise, please keep yourself muted when others are speaking. Following the dialogue, we will be circulating to you all and also post on our website, landscapes.global, the event recording, the PowerPoints, notes from the chats and the Q&A, and notes from the moderated discussion, and a short synthesis report. We'll also have some additional landscape finance profiles that will be coming out. So we'll be getting lots of documentation from this event because we want to use it to build on the subsequent dialogues. With that, let me now introduce my colleague and friend Daniel Zimmer, the Director of Sustainable Land Use for Climate Kick and co-lead of the 1000 Landscapes Landscape Finance Solutions Design Team. He will provide an overview of the landscape finance work of 1000 Landscapes, describe the dialogue series and the agenda for today's first dialogue. Thank you very much.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be with you today to present you this dialogue series that we are starting now with our colleagues of the 1000 Landscape program. First of all, the Landscape Finance Design team of the program has three major activities. The first one aims to develop a landscape accelerator in order to help landscape partners develop their investment portfolios. The second activity aims to create and disseminate or facilitate the adoption of landscape finance mechanisms with particularly a number of landscape partnerships. And the third activity aims to work with the financial actor in order to identify ways and induce the transformation of landscape finance systems. So this activity today, the workshops and dialogues we are organizing are part of this third type of activity of the design team. Next. So what we want to do with this dialogue series is to create meaningful and fruitful exchanges between landscape initiatives and a diversity of funders. We want to help all of the participants to understand challenges of shifting financial flows to locally led investment strategies for landscape regeneration. And for this, identify ways to address these challenges. Next. We have imagined that for a start, we will have three dialogues. The first one today focuses on the role of landscape partnerships in mobilizing finance for portfolios of landscape regeneration activities. We come back to this later. In the second dialogue, we will focus more on the finance side and particularly on models and mechanisms for funding private and public projects in landscapes. So first, start from the landscape perspective, and second, start more from a finance perspective. And then the third dialogue will try to bring everything together and to have exchanges on gaps and opportunities between landscape actors and finance actors. We have next, for this first webinar, we have collected with a sort of standardized format, a number of presentations from 12 landscapes where you can see the overall ambition of the landscape and the portfolios that they have prepared with a number of lessons learned on the development of these portfolios and the financing of those. So you can see on this map that we are covering quite well all continents with two landscapes in Latin America or South America, two landscapes in Mexico, 3 landscapes in Europe, 2 landscapes in Africa, 2 in India, and another one in Vietnam. So with this, we have quite a diversity of perspectives and issues. And quickly, next slide. So the agenda of today. So Seth Seamus will present now the 5 dimensions of landscape finance, from the initial vision development to the mobilization of blended finance. We will then have, out of these 12 landscapes, we will have 2 concrete examples presented to you, and particularly with a focus on portfolio development and financial needs. And then we'll have moderated discussions on 2 main topics that will follow these 2 presentations. I give the floor back to Sarah.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for that introduction. Let me now then introduce Seth Seamus, my colleague at Eco Agriculture Partner. He's our Director of Finance and Policy, and also the co-lead of the 1000 Landscapes Finance Solutions Design Team, and a co-lead of the 1000 Landscapes Finance Accelerator, together with our colleague Jean-Louis Robadi of Regenerative Development Group. Go ahead, Seth.
Hi, thanks, Sarah, and thanks everyone for joining today. You may have heard the old communications adage about show, don't tell, and showing is mainly what we're going to try to do today. And you're going to hear from our wonderful presentations, presenters, the work that they're doing. So my job today is fairly easy. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to set the stage by introducing a couple of key concepts and approaches we've been working with in the 1000 Landscapes Finance Design Team. So next slide. So our jumping off point is the observation that to address very complex ecological and social challenges, that we require action not only at the farm and enterprise and supply chain scale, but also at the landscape scale. And essentially a landscape is a place that requires coordinated management for the stakeholders living there to meet their interlinked needs. And so this can be defined ecologically, politically, and culturally. In our work within 1000 Landscapes, we refer to this process as integrated landscape management. So for how to sort of successfully coordinate at a landscape scale. And within integrated landscape management, there's a central idea that the work in the landscapes are coordinated by some entity that facilitates communication and planning among the stakeholders so that the activities are coherent in space and time, and that this integrated set of actions can lead directionally towards the fulfillment of a landscape-wide strategy. And so we call that a landscape partnership or a landscape initiative. And these entities can take many forms. So integrated landscape finance is about how to fund this landscape scale transformation. And so this includes, the way that we see it, is multi-project, multi-sector sets of activities. And the premise is that looking at finance in this way introduces new ways of thinking about how different projects and enterprises in a landscape can have powerful negative or positive interactions on profitability, risk, and social and ecological impact. And that we see that coordinated planning of these investments can both enhance business and project performance and also accelerate landscape transformation. Next slide. So now I'll introduce the dimensions of integrated landscape finance. I should note that our design team has diverse perspectives, and what I'm introducing here is a rough framing of our work, and that not every member necessarily is signed on to every single word I'm going to say, but this is the way that we are broadly framing our work and have framed the presentations that you see in the PowerPoints. So I'll say a bit about each of these. And these also are not sequential. So, and they don't need to happen in the same way at the same time. So for example, you can, you might have a few scattered deals in a landscape that create some momentum and a catalyst to build a landscape partnership, which then creates your vision. So, vision and strategy, action plan, identifying finance needs, developing finance mechanisms, and mobilizing finance. So I'm going to say a bit about each. So first, the vision and the strategy. Next slide. So in this component, a landscape partnership develops a strategy for transformation to achieve a long-term vision. And this vision, in theory, inspires a broad group of landscape stakeholders into collective action. And this isn't something that comes out of nowhere. It builds on existing plans and institutions within the landscape. And based on this, stakeholders can begin to develop in more concrete terms what results and targets they want to achieve in the landscape. And ideally, these targets will specify where change is needed and who needs to be involved. Next slide. The action plan. So based on the broad directions of the long-term strategy, a landscape partnership can develop a shorter-term action plan, which could build on existing businesses and projects and include ideas for new ones. The plan could also include elements that shift harmful financial flows towards more positive terrain, and also policy actions so that the broader enabling environment better aligns with the landscape vision. And ideally, this is also organized spatially and sequentially. Next slide. So on to identifying needs. So this is where we see the development of what we refer to as the landscape investment portfolio, in which the financial needs of a set of priority investments are identified. Some of these priority projects will already have clear business plans and cash flow models, but others will be newer and they'll need to be developed. And the businesses and organizations will need to clearly identify their existing resources and additional financing needs. Next slide. So some of the businesses and projects in the investment portfolio may be able to self-finance or access sources of funding well known to their developers, but others will need new kinds of financing. And there are a wide range of financing models, that may be necessary to fund specific businesses and projects or to reduce the risks. Some of these financing mechanisms may be designed specifically to support landscape scale objectives or focus on multiple elements of a landscape scale portfolio. We call those landscape finance mechanisms, and as Daniel said, that's actually the focus of the second of this dialogue series. Next slide. So on mobilizing finance, and by the way, you'll get all these slides, so you can read all this text later for these, but this is, these images are meant to be illustrative. So ultimately, the project developers and landscape partnerships and their allies will engage potential investors and funders across the finance spectrum to mobilize the resources they need for these projects. And for these investors and funders, more and more, it has been our observation that the limitation for many of them is not a lack of interest in these landscape-aligned opportunities, but an ability to find projects that meet their specifications for deal size, risk profile, and geography. And this figure shows how this funding might be mobilized over time. Next slide. And this is the last slide. So I also want to note that some of this is very technical work, and the partnerships themselves, or the members, the stakeholders, may not necessarily be doing it all by themselves. So they may need support in terms of economic and financial analysis, or business development, or finance mechanism development, or deal making. And so that's part of the work. Daniel mentioned the accelerators. So we're trying to figure out how to do this most efficiently and effectively to provide that kind of support. So that's it. You're about to see some real world examples. And so I will stop telling and we can start showing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Seth. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Percy Summers, who's the Senior Director of Science and Development at Conservation International Peru, who's been working for a long time in the Alto Mayo landscape in San Martin, Peru. Go ahead, on to you.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Sarah mentioned my name is Percy Summers. I work at Conservation International in Peru. But today I am going to be representing a broader group of organizations and people that have been working for the sustainability or a sustainable development model for Alto Mayo, which is located in northeastern Peru. And as you can see from the picture, it's a very much a forest, tropical forest landscape in the slopes where the Andes meet the Amazon basin, right? Next. So I'm going to try to be talking a little bit about what the challenges have been from a financing perspective, how we've been moving forward. And for that, I want to start at a broader perspective, which is San Martin, which is the whole region. And I think it's important to mention San Martin. San Martin is a is a region of Peru, a department that has been very much in the upfront of promoting green development models. So they have been an example for a lot of other regions on how to move forward with an agenda that promotes green development. And one of these regions where a lot of the action is being focused is Alto Mayo. Next one, please. And Alto Mayo is in the northern part of San Martin. It's also a region that has experienced a lot of change, right? In dark green, you can see the Alto Mayo Protected Forest, which is a national level protected area. In orange are Awahun indigenous communities. And that dotted line that runs in the middle is the paved highway that goes all the way from the fluvial ports in the Amazon to the ports in the Pacific Ocean. So that has become like an economic corridor where a lot of activities is going on. Also, a lot of deforestation because of migration from the Andes and into the Amazon, and this has presented a lot of challenges for the region, but at the same time, opportunities. Next one, please. So in Alto Mayo, there's, as I mentioned, a lot of organizations and partners working towards this sustainable development model. There's no formal structure, official structure, but I think the most important thing to recognize here is the leadership of the regional government, who convenes and has been able to put this group together and push forward this development agenda. Next one, please. As I mentioned at the beginning, San Martin has been has promoted a very innovative vision of development. San Martin depends a lot on agriculture for its economic development. And one of the things that, so this presents a lot of challenges, because with agriculture comes, in a forested landscape, comes a lot of conversion from forest to agriculture. But I think the most important thing to recognize is their ability to be able to start shifting this, start promoting this transformation. And today their vision is focused on the one side, not losing sight of the importance of being more productive, being more competitive, but at the same time doing all of this in a low carbon emissions approach, and at the same time including this more equitable intercultural approach to how they work. A lot of the agricultural is being done through small landholders, and that a lot of what they promote is how to work with this group of small landholders and how they can become part of a much more equitable development strategy. There's 4 development poles, one of which is Alto Mayo, and which I'm going to be focused a lot of what's been happening at the landscape scale. Next one, please. The transformation strategy happened in many phases, but I think an important challenge that was faced at the beginning was this lack of trust between private and public sectors to move this agenda forward. And of course, a lot of this more disciplinary lens of trying to focus it from an economic development perspective only. And part of the challenge was to open it up. Be able to build those bridges between private and public sectors, and open it up to not just being a lens from economic development, but being actually a multidisciplinary lens. A lot of this turning point was possible due to a critical exchange that was done with other regions of Peru, not necessarily in the Amazon, but where a lot of these issues were already being addressed. So they could see firsthand what this meant, what the opportunities were for the regional government. And this allowed the whole group not to really engage the high-level officials, because a lot of the technical officials were convinced, but the high-level officials, the decision makers, were still didn't have that engagement level until these things started to happen. Once they were engaged, the high-level officials were the ones that pushed forward the strategies that today drive this new development model for San Martin. They created the Office for Sustainable Public-Private Investments, which is an agency that engages directly with the private sector under the umbrella of sustainability, social and environmental. They created the climate change strategy, and that led to the low emissions rural development strategy, which today is the blueprint through which all the other plans are aligned to. No? Next one, please. So the action plan one of these, in this broader strategy, one of these development poles is Alto Mayo. There's a lot in the action plan that is presented. There's conservation and restoration strategies, of course, actions that are promoted, a conservation corridor to connect local conservation areas, strengthen the watershed management plan, which is already being promoted through the water agency, national level water agency, and it's one of the first ones in the Amazon. There's keep strengthening the co-management model for the Alto Mayo protected forest, which is a national level protected area. So a lot of these conservation and restoration strategies coupled with work at the enabling conditions, promoting policies for private sector investments, conservation agreements as part of a tool that's being promoted through the government to be able to sign agreements with small landholders, promoting those working groups to address critical issues in the value chains, especially for coffee, cocoa. Then we have strengthening capacities. There's a lot of stakeholders. There's a lot of needs to strengthen the Indigenous Federation Group, the Park Service, of course, financial mechanisms, payment for ecosystem services, for water, for carbon, for scenic beauty, for different schemes. And in the middle is the public-private investment processes that are leveraging the government funds to be aligned with the private sector funds and needs, right? And all under this broader structure. Next one, please. So many of these are underway. There's a lot of work being done with the smallholder coffee cooperative farmers. There's a lot of work being done with cacao. So in the lower parts of the basin, cacao is a key commodity. In the upper parts of the basin, coffee is the key commodity. Both have been drivers of deforestation, and a lot of the work that's being done is to reverse these processes. And a lot of the work with small landholders is creating those capacities. And then with the private sector, how do we make sure that they are sourcing from those programs that secure no further deforestation? A lot of the work that's being done is also within the realm of ecosystem services scheme, forest carbon projects. The Amazon Business Alliance, which is a fund for the whole Amazon, has a specific financing window to promote bio-businesses in the landscape, medicinal herbal teas, coffee and cocoa value chains, vanilla, pitahaya, or other enterprises. And of course, the regional government also steps in and is co-financing a lot of this, like the community-based Tingana ecotourism venture. Next one, please. Financing is coming from private sector. In the case of carbon projects, even from outside of the landscape. Disney sources a lot of carbon credits from Alto Mayo protected forests. A lot of outside companies source from carbon projects that have also positive conservation and social impacts. No? Payment for watershed services is more local. Cities of Moyobamba and Rioja, which are in the landscape, pay for small landholders in the upper parts of the watershed to conserve and to adopt sustainable practices. There's voluntary campaigns. Starbucks is a big contributor to the landscape through a program for forest conservation and restoration in coffee landscapes. And of course, regional governments and national government also through governmental programs. Next one, please. Landscape finance mechanism, I already mentioned several of these ecosystem services mechanism, forest carbon, water, scenic beauty, private public investments through the Public-Private Investment Office of the regional government, the Amazon Business Alliance Fund, which is a broader fund, but has a specific financing window for the landscape. Next one, please. Some of the risks have to do with a lot of the investment is focused on the finance part. How do we make sure that these are actually having positive impacts over conservation and restoration, reducing the level of uncertainty for private sector to invest. A lot of the economies are still very informal, so property rights are not clear, especially with small landholder farmers. And there's a limited number of investment-ready projects and bio-businesses. To de-risk this, we're working to improve measurement, monitoring, and communication of impacts at the landscape scale. We're adopting the landscale tool starting this year. We're co-financing through the government, and we are, with the Amazon Business Alliance, designing a new bio-business incubator for creating future pipeline. Next one, please. Some of the financing needs, we need to strengthen our capacities to measure, monitor, and communicate impacts. We need to strengthen local partners' capacities, especially in finance, transparency, and accountability. We need to promote more learning exchanges between new science technologies and the use of traditional knowledge to strengthen a lot of this. This is and in asset investments, we need to scale what we're doing, and we need to incubate future projects. Next one, please. And finally, some of the lessons learned, a lot of the initial engagement with private sector, they have different timing, different expectations. Exchange with other regions was key to get mobilized interest from high-level officials. There's a lot of value in combining financing modalities, in complementary tools to provide that integrated view of the territory. And lastly, but not least, the importance of getting that standard tool for monitoring and communicating impact across landscapes. Thank you so much. I went a little bit over, sorry, but thank you so much and I'm open for questions in the question and answer chat. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Percy. A really fascinating landscape story, and you actually were just on time. It was great. Let me then ask you to take off your video and let me introduce Carl Russo, who's from another fascinating landscape example, the Mulanje Mountain Conservation Area, and he is the director of the Mulanje Mountain Conservation Trust. Go right ahead, Carl. I think you're on mute, Carl.
I am indeed. Good day to you all. Bonjour, buenos dias. My name is Carl. I'm from Mulanje in Malawi. In brief, I have been working here at Mount Mulanje for the past 20 years. Before that, I did set up some local NGOs working in Africa, and I've worked with some of the multilaterals and bilaterals. But today I welcome you to Mount Mulanje. That is the mountain on that screen, and what you see on the one side is the highest vertical climb in Africa. I think it's twice the height of El Capitan for those of you that are interested in climbing. Next. Just like to point out exactly where we are here in southern Malawi. We're not remote in any sense, but we are in alongside the border with Mozambique. I just like to point out from the slide that we are a relatively small landscape. We're a mountain Inselberg on the African plains. And I think the other important aspect here is that this is an area that has the oldest tea industry in Africa, about 150 years old. Next. A few photographs to give you a sense of the space. On the bottom there, you can see the tea landscapes. I think what's important to focus on is the population densities. Because we have such high rainfall in this area, we are very much a high density smallholder farmer environment, as well as a tier state environment. So yeah, next. The story about the organization I work for, the Mulanje Mountain Conservation Trust. I think we have been around for a long time, that we're relatively well known in this region. The area, the bullets I'd like to stress are, at this stage, after many years of working as a typical conservation trust fund on granting, we are now more seeking a management role of the protected area and a coordination role within the landscape of the biosphere to enable us to assist a range of sector agencies that sit around committees to make decisions on a number of important resources here. Next. The work, even on a relatively small landscape, still requires some considerate and considerable coordination. There are a lot of different types of agencies working around the mountain, from government, non-governmental organizations, communities, commerce. We have spent the past 2.5 years working with the assistance of the US Forest Service and our own Protected Area Management Authority to develop an integrated management plan around 8 different resources, which is a first for this part of Africa, looking at many other resources apart from the forest resource, which is key to this particular type of protected area. That multi-sectoral basis has also been integrated to avoid conflicts between resource use. So we then, as an organization, developed our strategic plan to align ourselves to this landscape planning, and now we work forward. But to make a short comment here about the fact that we've developed this planning based on about 80 village profiles that have been co-developed with village leadership within a number of communities surrounding the mountain within the transition zone of the Biosphere Reserve. And these have a series of priority needs and express local capacities. And that has really fed up into this integrated management plan. Next. Again, here we have typical challenges that are found across Africa, but I just want to focus on this beautiful 3D image courtesy of NASA to show you how you can see how clearly visible the reserve boundary is. It really stresses the point that the smallholder farmer density is right up to the fence line, so to say. We don't have a fence, we don't need one, but that mountain space is our landscape. The lake behind is in a different biosphere. This is our working area, and today, because of the stress, we really need to find a lot of nature positive, people positive, win-win activities that work for both and really talk to people's livelihoods so that unsustainable use becomes less of a threat. Next. Just in our past, as a typical conservation trust fund, we have granted large amounts of money. We have received a good endowment from the Global Environment Facility, well invested by the US Arbor Group, with a lot of CFA guidelines. We have had difficulty accessing the big grants more recently because that tends to go to the social services in Malawi and agricultural support. So we've almost been forced into looking at much more innovative financing, sustainable financing mechanisms to come around that. Next. And this is the spread of organizations that we now work with very closely. Some of you here represent these organizations. It's a powerful coalition for us in all sorts of different sectors, and we are very appreciative of our partnerships. We recognize the strengths of these organizations assisting us at Mount Mulanje. Next. So where have we got so far in the last few years? We have really started to focus on what we call the social contract of this landscape, to try and build community interest in conservation. And to do this, we've had to look at a variety of different interventions beyond the normal grants that we received in the past. We started to look at establishing a number of social enterprises. One is around our power production and distribution. We started to look at the potential of carbon finance. We've worked with South Pole around a biomass efficient cook stove stream, which is very useful. And we continue to invest into feasibility studies and business plans to try to find good partnerships between communities and management of the mountain and use of the resources around. Next. So, as I said before, our critical area of work right now on this landscape, in order for us to see it going forward, is for us to seek the concession of the protected area from government. And we've been working on this for some 1 year now. And last week we had government's chief technocrat out to look at this in some detail. And I'm expecting to see the minister next week to move this along. This is a process that does have immediate costs as we transform from a CTF to a management agency, and we need to invest into this capacity building and position ourselves in this new role. Ideally, going forward, we would work around a landscape bond that would bring the community as a whole in with us. It would look at a whole wide spectrum of commercial granting, new enterprise, a whole plethora of potential activities of financing, all consolidated and working together with our partners. But these are sort of developing, and this is why we're in the incubator, or within the accelerator with 1,000 landscapes. Next. So startups we've been involved in recently, looking at a range of these. We, as I say, always are looking to how we can involve the community in resource benefits, and then leverage their kind of responsibility towards conservation. If I pick out one here that's quite interesting, recently we contracted some finance from the Darwin Initiative to look at the potential with Fair Wild to use some of the natural products around the mountain. We've done a great ethnobotanical survey, and we're taking this up with some French government support and some business investment in a joint venture to start a factory to move on with some of these, which we have now started replicating outside the protected area, endemic products from plants. Quite exciting. Next. And we continue with our scale-ups, and this is where we have been busy for the last 5 to 10 years, steadily building up our ability to really engage with the broader community on a much larger scale. Many of those interventions will be similar to you, but I just want to talk to another one briefly, the hydropower IPP that we have. We set up a Mega Magetse. It has a generation distribution license. We have built that with a number of different grant investments. We are now selling a majority sharehold to Varingo Corporation looking at a joint venture with Gridworks to expand our power generation, probably up to about six megawatts and out to about 10,000 customers and expanding our grid. Quite exciting, but complicated work when most of the time you're trying to do conservation work. Again, looking at the bottom there, blended finances is often the best approach here. We find that mixing grants with investments, impact investments is the best way to go forward, cushioning risks or breaking bottlenecks, building capacity, but enabling a business basis of the investments. Next. And another typical landscape finance mechanism that's ongoing here in Mulanje is the development of the Blantyre Mulanje Water Fund, working with the Nature Conservancy and Water for People. This is steadily being developed, and we're on our way to getting a payments for ecosystem services scheme operational to look after the catchment and the broader conservation of the mountain ecology. Next. So in final comment, I'd just like to look at our landscape learnings. We picking out a few here. I think one of the critical ones is when you're working in different sectors is to keep your synergies, to keep your standard approaches very similar, so you don't find that there's conflicts either at community level or in the way in which companies work. Another important one is always to seek out these triple win benefits. Sometimes you can get a good conservation and commerce activity going, that adding a few components really brings in a nice conservation story too. And lastly, the story around building partnerships takes time, it takes perseverance and patience, but it's very worthwhile in the long term to keep these going. Thank you. Next. And again, just a beautiful view courtesy of NASA and University of Maryland. That's the mountain. It is a great space, and I think in the next issue or two of the Smithsonian, they're carrying Mulanje, so keep a lookout. I happily take any comments and welcome any cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carl. It is a fascinating story and amazing accomplishments that have been done there over these last couple of decades. If any of you do have questions for Carl and Percy, or for Daniel and Seth, just a reminder to put them in the Q&A right now. That might disappear once we start the next session, but if then you can put it in the chat. Thank you so much to all the speakers for your presentation. We're now getting ready to move into the moderated discussion portion of our dialogue. You'll notice that the system's going to change so that you will in fact be able to speak, you'll be able to communicate with one another, you'll be able to see one another's videos. Shannon's setting that up in there. Please be sure to keep your microphone on mute though, to avoid background noise in the conversation. And use the Zoom function. You'll see there's a raise hand symbol at the bottom. You can use this to comment, but each of the moderators are going to give you the instructions of the nestings, because we'd really love to get your wisdom, experience, and insights and ideas into this process. So let me introduce our two our moderators. The first is Alejandro Diaz Loyola, who is a landscape finance specialist at our partner Commonland. And also he will then turn over when he's done to Annalise Withoffs, who's the program manager at the IKEA Foundation. Go ahead, Alejandro.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and pleasure to be here. And thank you also to all of our partners who have shared great slides about their landscapes and their activities, their achievements, and the lessons that they have learned. I very much encourage everyone to take a look at those slides when you have some time, and also to reach out to those partners if you're interested in connecting and learning more. I did get a chance to go through some of those slides, and there are some lessons that I found particularly stood out and were consistent across many, including, for example, a lesson of the need to have flexible and long-term finance, both for early stage opportunities, but also incorporating funding like at Common, we like to say process funding that is geared towards the landscape partnership, the partnership building process, not just specific investment opportunities. And also the need to work at a landscape level and try wherever possible to move away from project-specific funding and towards a more cohesive approach. So those are just a few of the lessons. I think we now want to open it up. We will share a couple of links in the chat to Google Docs. So Shannon, if we can do that, we will then ask you, we'll give you a couple of minutes to go to those documents, respond with some of the questions there. Respond to some of the questions that I'll just mention. And we will then collect that information. Again, this is a starting point for a series. It's a dialogue series across multiple events. This will be critical also to influence and to complement the upcoming sessions that we will have. And we'll compile this information that will be very handy for us and that we can all contribute to. So now in the chat, you will see a link. Please go to the link. The first question is really, what has been your experience developing and financing investment portfolios that go across sectors, places, and projects that achieve landscape level objectives? And similarly, around those points, what can funders, financiers, and also landscape partnerships do to make the process easier and more effective? So again, please open up those links. There will be sections within that document. You can just select one and type in. Feel free to include also your name, entirely optional for tracking and for folks to respond to. We'll give you a couple of minutes to start inputting your information, and then we'll open it up for the discussion. I see some folks responding. And again, your experience developing and financing investment portfolios at a landscape level, and what can be done differently to support this process. Great to see so many contributions already. Wonderful. So just half a minute more or so, and we'll get going with that discussion for time. I do see some comments about opening the Google Doc. Please feel free, if you can't open the Google Doc, also you can type in your comment here just so that we can track it and then we can incorporate it. Great. Great. So I would like to again come back to the discussion. Please whenever you would like to contribute and speak, please do raise your hand so that we can then identify that and unmute you. Please, get started on. Yeah, let's switch over so that folks can raise their hands.
If I could just speak here for just a moment, I'm seeing that I can only see a small number of all of you participants on the screen right now. And I think that's because you haven't all accepted to be panelists. Making you a panelist doesn't mean you have to be on a panel. It just means that the rest of us can see that you're there. And if you should like to say something, you can. So I don't know, Shannon, if you want to reintroduce into the chat what people need to do to do that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've said it a couple of times. I think that there are maybe just some folks that would rather just sort of engage a little bit behind the scenes.
Well, I'm also, we have one comment here that says they can't see an option to promote to panelists. Can you just explain what they should do?
Yeah, I'm moving through the list, so I'll get to everyone.
Fabulous. Okay, thank you so much. Go ahead. Sorry, Alejandro.
Not a problem. I think we can, for those who now have the option, please do raise your hands. I see
there's a few in the queue already. We have
just a quick note that everyone should be able to raise their hand. So if they don't yet have a promote to panelist request, they can still raise their hand, and I'll be able to call them then to unmute.
Yeah, I saw Rex Raymond and Georgina Barker, Alejandro, if you want to.
Yeah, Rex, do you want to unmute? And Georgina as well? I see your hand raised. And if I can get the support from the team to unmute them.
Hi, this is Rex.
Great. Hi, Rex.
Right there. Yeah, do you want me to jump in with some comments?
Please do. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity, and thanks for this great dialogue. There's a lot going on with all the Google slides and the presentations, the chat, and the Q&A. So it's very dynamic. So I'm with a group called Transformational Investing in Food Systems. So my experience is mostly in working with impact investors, and that can be family offices or the mission investing teams of foundations, and activating them for kind of landscape finance, but also working with some grassroots movements, in particular those working on in the agroecology movement, to engage with, figure out how they engage with markets and business. And then currently also engaging a number of fund managers with an impact orientation on their approaches for financing systems change. And I think that's all very relevant to the landscape finance conversation that we're having. Maybe just a couple of quick observations. So I think the presenters have covered the holistic nature of landscape finance. And I would say, I think the starting point, I think I saw a question from Roy Steiner about that as well, is the kind of the governance and the facilitation of those partnerships. It's really the starting point, and it can be very challenging to find that initial capital to get those, to fund those governance structures. In my experience in activating those impact investors, several things keep coming up around investment readiness of local enterprises, especially investment readiness with regards to international investors. It's a different conversation between an international investor or a domestic or local one. There's lots of innovation happening, especially in impact investment funds with regards to blending different forms of financial capital with technical assistance, business assistance, and kind of networking and synergistic effects that can sort of show a pathway for that can also kind of show the relevance and models that that domestic finance providers can provide. And so in addition to that investment readiness, and for those who are seeking international investment, the cost of operating capital is often still prohibitive. So the opportunities for growth by those kind of social enterprises often require some innovation and some creative approaches to maybe put in place some guarantee structures to buy down or reduce the perceived risk for those international investors. It could maybe mean some creativity in terms of the type of the structure of financing, maybe allowing some revenue-based financing that give the entrepreneur a little bit more runway to reinvest in the company before they start paying down on the principal of their loans. And then I think a lot of people have touched on this. The presenters have touched on this around the different types of value and how that's being created in those landscapes and how that's incentivized. And ecosystem services and carbon markets are really kind of interesting and transition tools. So just mention those. And I think they're interesting also for the private sector in terms of how they use them creatively on their balance books, again, as assets that can be used to negotiate lower operating costs, reducing the cost of capital. Those types of things are all happening at sort of a micro economics level, but these kind of macroeconomic structures really are an important, there's an important interplay.
Hopefully we can see a shift in that macro direction as well. And great to hear some of those examples already. I want to call on Georgina from UKFCDO.
Yeah, hi, thanks everyone. Thanks for letting me join the session, and thanks for the incredibly interesting set of slides that you sent around and the different case studies that we've had illuminated here. I think it's so useful to see the case studies in practice, because I think it's often a real disconnect between seeing a lot of the commitments and seeing a lot of the money in the space, and then actually understanding what that looks like in practice in the minute detail and the volume and complexity of stakeholders that are involved in those kind of landscape level partnerships that this whole initiative is about. I think just a quick note on kind of my role and my interest in this space. So the UK today has a significant program called Partnerships for Forests, and that's really a business incubator that helps to speak to fill some of this pipeline gap that has been mentioned here today. And myself and the team that I work in have been doing some scoping on what phase 2 of that program might look like, and kind of how you build capacity to even feed that pipeline. And a lot of that involves obviously targeting smallholders, and I think that's one of the really key challenges, not just smallholders, but the governance that's involved outside of the private finance and outside of kind of short project level initiatives, but actually working with some of the tenure rights, working with some of the local capacity of broader landscape management and natural resource use. And I think that kind of work really takes time, and that's a real mismatch with a lot of the investments that are coming, that are there and ready to go, because there's an economic incentive, I suppose, and a desire on the investment side to have shorter term returns. And that, that timescale feels like a real disconnect. So for me, that feels like one of the bigger gaps in how you shift some of the investment space into seeing the value add of these landscape partnerships, and really trying to build that understanding that these returns often come over a longer time, but ultimately, should be more sustainable and have that bigger impact that a lot of the big impact investments are saying that they want to see. So I think a bit of education around that would be, is really vital. And then just a more mundane kind of question struck me while I was listening to, the presentations and seeing who's here today, and seeing some of the organizations that we've been working with and talking to. And I know from my own background, I'm by far not a finance expert, and I wonder if it's not just about the capacity on the ground of communities in these partnerships, but a lot of, and this is generally an open question to a lot of people on this call, do the NGOs and the partners working in this space are they finance experts? Do they know how to access a lot of this finance? Do they know how to speak this language? Is that another more mundane barrier that might be working in the space? So yeah, and that is very much a general open question. So back to you. Yeah, and thanks for the discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much, Georgina. I think it's a great question, actually, and one that we should be speaking of. Maybe we can also hear from one of our landscape partners who've contributed some of the slides. Maybe have some thoughts on that question that you raised as well. I don't see any hands, but does anyone want to jump in? We do have
I believe Tammy just raised her hand. You have a few hands, Edit and Eddie and Carl.
Yeah, I see Edit.
Hello, hi. So I'm Tammy, and together with Jean-Louis, we are the Regenerative Development Group, and we've been working with 1,000 landscapes, and specifically on the accelerator program and other elements as well in terms of financial mechanisms. So you bring up a really good point. So everybody here are landscapes experts, and I don't think anyone can expect for people to have the depth of financial knowledge, because that is a different competency. What we do at RDG and also as part of 1,000 Landscapes is really help facilitate the opening up of what is possible for each landscape and projects as well. So that is currently channeled much through the acceleration process, where we go through a methodology of doing listening to the landscape, first of all, the partners, what is there, what is possible, what are the support systems available, and then quickly going through the projects, etc., and eventually looking at sort of project flows and returns, which can then be built into a financial instrument and mechanism. So happy to take this offline, because I know that otherwise I could go on for too long, because I think people here know this is my passion. But yes, so 1,000 Landscape is great and has got facilities forward to answer your question. Process, yes.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Edith, do you want to unmute?
Yeah, thanks, Alejandro, and thanks for the invitation. It's very nice to be here and see so many familiar faces and also new ones. So my name is Edith Kies. I'm Chief Investment Officer at Valley Nature, a project developer in nature-based space. My background is in the carbon markets. I spent 17 years, so my career in that, and the last 10 around in the impact investment space, but very much focusing on the carbon and environmental assets. A very interesting question around the finance. Yeah, I think it's fascinating. It's very multidisciplinary, and I think that's one of the challenges that already in the carbon space, but beyond the landscape space, we need to overcome. I fully agree with a lot of interesting points have been made. I guess, again, coming from maybe from the environmental side, so where I have most of the experience and looking at the landscape angle is more from the starting with the carbon, which is the most bankable or easiest asset class. There are developments in other areas like biodiversity credits, which hopefully will add some new additional bankability to these landscapes. So I think that's definitely a reflection, or my experience, that it's easier to start with that and then build on that. Fantastic to see those two case studies. San Martin obviously have been working in that area as well with Althelia. But it shows it's a long time, right? It's a really long process, and we don't have time, so that's always the challenge. How do we speed it up? I do see a lot of gap on the, just again coming back on a carbon, the capacity building side for governments. We're struggling to go to the jurisdictional scale, which is essential for the credibility of carbon and for scaling up the market. So where I see interesting opportunities maybe, and can take it also offline, is when you have such a beautiful already like baked program like in San Martin, next step, could it be like a jurisdictional carbon framework, which brings more capital and hopefully more fluidity to those other projects or programs. And really just to, again, maybe a plea to try to get more collaboration, I think, with this landscape approach. It includes also the economic zones and combined zones, and collaborate with those who work on the carbon side, on the natural zones, and bring synergies there, because I think we can hopefully with carbon, you can subsidize these other activities. That's what we try with Althili, right? Subsidizing with carbon, the cacao and others on small scale, it works. So I think we can go larger scale, and we do struggle with jurisdictions to implement programs. And so this is like a bottom up and top down. We need to bring that together. So I think there's huge opportunities there. Blended finance is key. And I really, the bond, I've seen on the Malawi example, landscape bonds. I'm quite excited about those. There are more and more bonds, creative financial instruments, so creating different source of capital from international markets using the coupon. I just saw this morning another example of that in Vietnam. So I think there is so much financial innovation that makes me hopeful that we can bring different capital also into these local contexts. So yeah, very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Edith, for that. Unfortunately, we're out of time, Carl, but I would like to, hand it over to Annelies at this point. So Annelies, please.
Okay. So thank you. And I'm going to switch the conversation a little bit to the second theme being the coordination of the investment. So we've all been speaking a little bit about what is needed to develop these landscape portfolios. Initial capital is needed, capacity is needed, facilitation is needed, the right language. But once you have the different funding streams that you need to really develop the landscapes, public funding, private investments, carbon credit schemes, we've heard, grants, social enterprises, we've heard several things, de-risking facilities. So all these different mechanisms and all these different financiers, once you have them on board, you also still need to coordinate them, right? To make sure that the goals are aligned, make sure that the timelines maybe are aligned, the metrics of success may be aligned. And that is at times, I can imagine, a difficult one. If you want to avoid to lose the synergies that are there, or avoid to lose the triple win that Carl referred to earlier. We have the questions. I think you posted them in the chat, Shannon. The questions are, what have you learned about coordinating these investments and the different financing of the different financiers to make sure that there are these synergies between them and that risks are reduced? If you can shed some light or some thought on what has worked, what made it difficult, or how have you overcome these difficulties? And yeah, what can we all learn about making it more effective, coordinating the different financial streams? Same as with the previous section, there is a link in the chat. So if you can go there and then you can fill in, you will see the question again, and you can fill in one of the lines, your answer. I'll give you 2 minutes to think about that. And then I'll call on a few people from the audience to talk. So I'll be quiet for 2 minutes. I think the activity is still ongoing. Some people are still typing, but as we are almost to the end of this webinar, I don't want to be too silent for too long. So feel free to raise your hand if you want to share something in this discussion. And to get you all kickstarted, I would like to invite Hermione Neville, who is Senior Consultant at the IFC, to share already her thoughts and experiences. Hermione, can you unmute and come online, please?
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Great, thanks, Annalise. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this discussion. I think as IFC, we're starting to become more interested in this space. And maybe just for context, there are different parts of the IFC, and I'm on the advisory side, which means that we really work to create markets or to try and build the enabling environment for certain markets. So we've been looking at biodiversity finance and landscape finance as potential markets that may eventually interest IFC as a financier. And on the biodiversity finance side, IFC has developed a taxonomy so it can tag and monitor and kind of set targets for its portfolio going forward. But in terms of landscape finance mechanisms, thinking more holistically, I would say IFC is fairly risk averse, and particularly when it comes to these kind of new fields. So us on the advisory side, trying to get upstream of the actual transaction and build the ecosystem is important, and where I'm currently sitting. So I think there's a couple of learnings in terms of the kind of coordinating investments and financing side. And we have done some work with the Regenerative Development Group in Southern Africa. And I think one of the findings there is that there is more than one approach to this, and bringing different financiers into kind of one deal is really the dream, but it's still pretty complicated. And so it also worth, thinking through how you can try and break up these transactions into pieces that are more easily targeted at specific investors, or trying to kind of modularize or phase investment, for example, into kind of carbon development programs, for example. So I think then it's also necessary to tell that story differently to each type of investor. And that was another learning, I think, each category of investor, needs to hear a different story and needs to see and visualize their participation in these deals differently. I'll pause there. Thanks, Annalise.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Is there anybody that has maybe contributed to the Word document that would want to share his or her point with us here in live? Marlies, I see your hand is up. Please unmute.
My hand is up on behalf of someone else, and I just wanted to see if we can add one more panelist, because our landscape coordinator from Ghana is in the call. And I thought I'd kind of let him speak rather than kind of me on his behalf asking the question, but it seems somehow that he was not added as a panelist. So I just thought if that's possible to still add him, then maybe someone else can do a question first, but he would love to contribute.
Just let me know the name.
Ahmed Aziz.
Okay, great. Yeah. Done.
Okay, while we wait for Ahmed.
I think he might be. Ahmed, are you there?
I do see him, yeah, and he's unmuted.
Yes,
so yes. Come in. Okay.
Yes, hello, thank you so much, and happy to be part of this discussion. So my name is Aziz Ahmed, Ghana Landscape Coordinator for the Landscape Resilience Fund. Just wanted to share a few perspectives from what we do. So in Ghana, we are active in the Kakum landscape, and this Kakum landscape is located in the central region of Ghana, and it is a cocoa and forest hotspot area for Ghana. So the Landscape Resilience Fund has been active in this landscape since last year. And then what we have done is to basically support the Landscape Multi-Stakeholder Initiative and Landscape Multi-Stakeholder Platform that is existing in this landscape. And this is a platform that brings different stakeholders together, cocoa and forest stakeholders, to work collectively at the landscape level, pre-competitively, to try to solve some of the key challenges in the landscape. In this landscape, we see a lot of smallholder farmers. Cocoa is a dominant crop, so most of the farmers are cocoa farmers. However, we have seen, the issues of climate change, rainfall becoming erratic, temperature rises, and therefore together with some of the local partners on the ground, we work to provide the needed skill, the needed knowledge to these farmers to be able to improve their adaptation and resilience to climate change. I think there was a topic on landscape governance, which was mentioned. This is also very important. If you look at the way the cocoa landscapes in Ghana are fragmented, and the fact that the small scale farmers are producing on less than 1 hectare or less than 2 hectares, you need to be able to have more coordinated landscape level approach to be able to bring everybody on board from a cocoa production perspective and then from a forest protection perspective. And this is something that we're trying to do in this landscape. We have made our first investment in Coa Impact Ghana, and Coa Impact is also providing some adaptation services to farmers that increases their incomes and their livelihoods by about 30% on average. So just to say 1 or 2 lessons that we have learned so far is we need to be able to plug in at the landscape level. You need to be able to find the right synergies and alignment with different stakeholders that are operating in the landscape so that you can be able to build on top of what is being done to help scale, let's say, forest protection impact. And then not just come in and try to do a solo type of work. You need to be able to connect the dots, build on and align with different stakeholders at the landscape level. There's an important lesson that I just wanted to share.
Okay, thank you. Is there, thank you so much, Ahmed. Is there anybody who can really give us in a few minutes time some experiences of coordinating different types of investment and trying to get the different languages of different investees aligned? Natalia, I see your hand is up. Can you contribute and maybe stick to 2 minutes?
Yes, thank you so much for letting me participate in this space. Well, I almost have no experience about finance, but I really would like to share a lesson learned from a recent experience in one model forest in Peru. Well, I learned that it is important not only mapping stakeholders, but also defining roles when we talk about finance. I mean, in order to scale from the project approach to the landscape level approach, and in order to not only apply, but also construct a landscape level strategy, it is important that governance conditions are mature. I mean, to overcome some challenges like seeing the allies are also competitors when we talk about money. And in fact, in the case that I have worked with, they see each other as competitors, but they are not. They actually build synergies, but they haven't noticed yet. So that make us to go back to the first step, that is constructed a solid landscape partnership, that it's a long-term process, because you map, then you go back, then you map again, and construct allies. It's more than only mapping them and defining them. That's what I wanted to share.
Thank you so much. And I think it takes us quite nicely back circle to where we started on how to build landscape investment portfolios and landscape partnerships. So thank you all so much for your contributions. And I'm sure that there's much more to share. There are, of course, next to the presentations that we had, another 10 presentations online. I think that has been shared already, slides. And the recording of this conversation will be available. But I'll hand it over to Sarah to close us off and say the last few minutes.
Thank you very much, Alejandro and Annalise, and everyone else who contributed both on the Google Docs and verbally. Beginnings of a very rich dialogue. I'm just going to take a couple minutes here to wrap up. Thank you very much, Lily, for putting that up on the screen. I want to just tell you a little bit about the next steps. The first one, as everyone who has actually taken a look at these has said, it is pretty inspiring to look at these landscape finance profiles from all around the world. We should have 13 of them. I think there's 10 or 11 there that are now, a couple more are coming on there, that sort of try to quickly describe the journey so you can learn about them fairly quickly. But I think they show for me, very inspiring. They show the opportunities, they show the immense progress that has been made in some of the landscapes where they've been doing this for a little while. And at the same time, it shows the gaps, it shows the challenges of what's going on. And each of them have laid out a set of sort of lessons learned, and we're going to try to be compiling those. Everything from this this event is going, we did have a recording made. The recording, the chat, the PowerPoints, the short report will all be, Q&A results will all be shared with you, hopefully, relatively soon, but by the next week or so. We'll also be trying to digest some of the key points that were made in the Google Docs, and in your comments and in the contributions of the landscape partnerships, and try to summarize these in a Miro board. Some of you may be familiar with the use of a sort of a collaborative Miro board, and we'll make that available a little bit later as we get those thoughts together to help prepare us for the next dialogue. We're hoping that you will also join us for the next dialogue, which, as Daniel had mentioned, is going to focus on landscape finance mechanisms, particularly on April 26th. And you'll see also a very wide range of different kinds of interesting finance mechanisms that have been used by different financial actors and combinations of actors. And then on June 8th, we'll focus on that finance system transformation. And there may be more, but that's what's going to happen with us. And let's see, what I'd like to just close with is the thank yous to all the people who helped make this event possible. In particular, I'd like to thank Annalise Withofs of the IKEA Foundation, Latul Barua and Deepika Nukala of the Loudest Foundation for their financial and communications, as well as planning support to 1,000 Landscapes in the series. Also to the dialogue organizers, Daniel Zimmer of Climate Kick, Seth Seamus, Juan Ramos, and Lily Hamilton of Eco Agriculture Partners, Alejandro Diaz of Commonland, Jean-Louis Robadi of the Regenerative Development Group, and Ilko Kay of Rainforest Alliance. We also very much appreciate the communication support from my colleagues at Eco Agriculture Partners and the 1,000 Landscapes Communication Center of Shannon Sunderland and Mike Keller. The slide that's showing right here shows you where you can get some more information about 1,000 Landscapes for 1 billion people. We are hoping to build a really exciting and powerful network of the folks who are working in this space for us to learn from what you have been doing, bring our brains together and figure out how we can much more quickly accelerate the challenge of financing these amazing initiatives. You saw the 2 examples today and the others that are on the website. We'd welcome you to sign up on our web newsletter. If you're interested in working, participating potentially in the Landscape Finance Solutions design team work, or just like to find out a little bit more about that, you can contact Seth Seamus or Daniel Zimmer, who are the co-leads of that. My email address is also there. I'm working with Daniel on the work stream on landscape finance systems transformation. But there's a much larger group of us, and we're really trying to foster the collaboration between the landscape partnerships and the financial community. So we look forward to you helping us to solve these very challenging issues and moving us to the next level for landscape finance. Don't hesitate also to reach out directly to the landscape partnerships that presented today, as well as from any of those that are, the contact information is on any of those that are posted in the landscape finance profiles on the landscapes.global website. I'm sure they'd be very interested to talk to any of you. All right, that's all for now. Thank you so much to everybody, and I hope you have a very good week. Bye-bye.